Hi guys, welcome to the session Detox with me. So this is basically an image-based toxicology revision, okay, which is aimed at revising the most high-yield topics from examination point of view. Okay, so I've kept it in image-based format so that it will be helpful for you to solve image-based questions as well. Okay, so let's start. Before starting with the images, I want you to know certain terminology. Toxicology, okay, it's very easy, you know very well, there is a study of poisons, but there is one more terminology, toxinology. What is the difference between toxicology and toxinology? Okay, see, toxicology is a study of poisons, okay, whereas toxinology is a study of toxin. Okay, what is the difference between the term poison and toxin? Toxin is any substance which is produced by a living organism. Okay, it can be produced by a plant, it can be produced by an animal. Okay, snake venom, example of toxin. Resin produced by Ricinus communis, it's a toxin. Okay, toxin is basically a subtype of poison. Okay, all toxins will be poison, right? So that is a basic difference. There is one more terminology you need to learn, that is ecotoxicology. When we say eco, that is environment. When you study the poison in relation to environment, that is called ecotoxicology. You have occupational toxicology because you know there are few poisoning which are associated with a particular occupation. If you study in relation to occupation, that is called occupational toxicology. We'll move further. Identify the person. Okay, E is Paracelsus. E is Paracelsus. E is the father of toxicology. He is credited to be the father of toxicology, Paracelsus. Okay, remember the person. He is another person who is even more important. He is Matthew Orfila. He is considered as the father of modern toxicology. Okay, just appreciate the difference between father of toxicology and father of modern toxicology. Matthew Orfila, father of modern toxicology, and Matthew Orfila is also credited to be the father of forensic psychiatry. This is another photograph of Matthew Orfila. Okay, so in the exam you can get any of the pictures, don't get confused. Both are Matthew Orfila, father of modern toxicology. Which of this poison is cardiotoxic? There are two steps in solving this question. First, you need to identify, then you need to identify which is cardiotoxic. Okay, so the first picture is cannabis, second picture is Abrus precatorius, Datura alba, and the last one is Cerbera thewessia, that is your yellow oleander, right? So now again, which of this person is cardiotoxic? Cerbera thewessia or yellow oleander is cardiotoxic. I want you to learn the classification, that is the purpose of having this question, because having a sound knowledge about the classification will help you to solve most of the questions, right? Let's start with the classification. I've given you this mnemonic in my lecture, SYNCAM. The mnemonic SYNCAM will give you the 6 important group of poisons, 6 important group. The first letter C, it refers to corrosives, and remember, any substance which corrode, it can be called as corrosive. And you have 2 groups in that. One is acid, the next one is alkali. I can ask you another question which is more dangerous, right? That's an easy question. Alkalis are more dangerous. Why? Because alkalis, they cause liquefactive necrosis. Alkalis, they cause liquefactive necrosis, whereas acids, they cause coagulative necrosis. Remember the letter C in acid and remember the letter L in alkali. The letter C in acid, that refers to coagulative necrosis, the letter L, that refers to liquefactive necrosis, right? So that is why liquefactive necrosis, alkalis are more dangerous than acid. Generally acids cause coagulative necrosis. There is one exception. The exception being hydrofluoric acid, right? Hydrofluoric acid is only acid which can cause liquefactive necrosis. This can again be an MCQ. Okay, out of all the 6 group, they can ask you which group gives you the maximum tissue destruction. The maximum tissue destruction is given by your corrosives, right? This is again one of your repeat NEET question. Maximum tissue destruction is given by your corrosives. Okay. Now, the next group I. The letter I, it refers to irritant, and remember the letter irritant, the word irritant, it refers to the property of inflammation, right? Any substance, any poison which can induce inflammation, that can be considered as irritant. There are 4 groups under that. We have metal, we have non-metal, we have plant, and we also have animal irritant. There are 6 groups coming under this. We need to see the examples. Metal, you know, that's a long list. You have mercury, lead, arsenic, iron, copper, cadmium, zinc. Okay, it's a big list. But for examination purpose, you need to learn about few important metals, right? We have mercury, we have arsenic, we have lead, copper, iron. These are the important metals we need to learn for examination purpose. Non-metal, though we have few important, few poison coming under non-metal, from examination point of view, we need to know about phosphorus. Plant irritants, starting from Ricinus communis, Abrus precatorius, Calotropis, Semicarpus anacardium, Croton, okay, Croton ticilium, and we also have Capsicum annum. Okay, these are the common plant irritants we need to learn. Okay, animal irritants, very simple. You can tell me snakes, scorpions, honeybees, centipede, okay, spider, animal irritant. Okay. Neurotoxic. The third important group is neurotoxic. Here you have many important groups coming under this. Let us discuss in detail. When we say neurotoxic, remember, when we say neurotoxic, the poison can either act on the brain, we refer cerebral poison, or the poison can act on the spinal cord, we refer it to as spinal poison, or it can act on the peripheral nerves, peripheral nerve poison. Okay, 3: cerebral, spinal, and peripheral. Okay, cerebral. Whenever the poison acting on the brain, it can either stimulate the brain, it can be a deliriant, it can depress the brain, it can induce sleep, somniferous poison, or it can cause intoxication, it can be an inebriant. Okay, fine, right. Deliriant. What are the deliriants we know of? Datura, cocaine, and cannabis. Datura, cocaine, cannabis. Somniferous, somna, sleep, right? So all opioids. Irritant, that is inebriant, it causes intoxication, basically your alcohols, ethanol, methanol, isopropyl alcohol, all alcohols will cause intoxication, right, which can be grouped under inebriants. Spinal poison. Spinal poison, 2 important poison we need to learn. One is Strychnos nux vomica. Okay, this is an important spinal poison, okay, which can cause convulsions. There is one more, yet another important poison, that is Gelsemium, which was asked in one of your recent exams. Okay, Gelsemium. Spinal poison, Nux vomica, and Gelsemium. Peripheral nerve poison, right? 2 important poison. One is Conium maculatum, which is also called as hemlock. Okay, Socrates died with this Conium maculatum. Okay, the next one is Curare. That is also a peripheral nerve poison. Okay, so this is your neurotoxic poison. The next group is cardiotoxic, which acts on the heart. It can induce cardiac arrhythmia. For that, I can give you the mnemonic Cardona. Okay, cardiac. Car refers to cardiac. D for digitalis. O for oleander, which includes both pink oleander and yellow oleander. N for nicotine, that is your tobacco. And the last but not least, that is your aconite. Okay, sweet poison. Digitalis, oleander, nicotine, and aconite. Fine. The next group is asphyxiants. Any poison which can induce asphyxia-like features. Right? When we say asphyxia, don't think only about mechanical asphyxia, hanging, strangulation. If the cell is not able to derive oxygen, if the tissues are suffering from hypoxia, we can include the poison as asphyxiants. Okay, mostly gases. What are the gases? We have carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen cyanide, hydrogen sulfide. Okay, so these are all asphyxiants. The last group is miscellaneous, which includes food poison, agricultural poison. Okay, agricultural poison, OPC. So these are the groups which we have to learn. So just have a broad idea about the classification, which will help you solve some of the MCQs which can be asked in classification. Now you can answer this question very easily. Cannabis, it refers to neurotoxic, deliriant. Abrus peccatorius, that is your irritant, plant irritant. Datura is again deliriant, and this is cardiotoxic. This is cardiotoxic, that is your pink oleander, yellow oleander. Okay, remember yellow oleander. This is also called as Cerbera thewachia. Okay, Cerbera thewachia, your yellow oleander. Right. Odorless poison. Odorless poison. 4 options are. The first poison. What is the first poison? The poison which is crystalline, which is always kept under water, because when you take it out, it will burn. Right. It is spontaneously. It is prone for spontaneous combustion. It will burn. Right. It will catch fire. This is nothing but your white phosphorus. Okay. The next one is phenol. The third one is datura. And the last one is cyanide. Okay. Hydrogen cyanide. Which of these is odorless, without any smell? Datura, without any smell. Okay. Let's learn the smell with regard to poison. Okay. Cyanide, I've given you the list. Cyanide, it has got bitter almond smell. Bitter almond smell. Not everyone can perceive the smell. I've told you. Cannabis, burnt rope. Okay, rope. Thallium, arsenic and phosphorus have grouped together. You can remember it as TAP. Why? Because thallium, arsenic and phosphorus, they generally have got garlic odor. Garlic odor. Okay. Zinc phosphide, which was asked in one of your recent JIPMER exam, this session, okay, 2020, fishy odor, zinc phosphide. Chloral hydrate and peraldehyde, they have got acrid, pure smell. Hydrogen sulfide, again it was asked last week, okay, FMGE session. Hydrogen sulfide has got rotten egg smell. Rotten egg smell. Okay, I'll tell you some more. These are the basic information. Okay, level 1 difficulty questions, you can get that. I'll tell you some more important poison with related to poison. The most important one, alcohol. Can you tell me what is the smell of alcohol? Okay. Fruity odor. Because alcohol is basically produced by fermentation process, like, so it has got fruity odor. Then we need to learn your nitrobenzene. Nitrobenzene has got shoe polish. Shoe polish smell. We have got hemlock. I told you, right? Conium maculatum. It has got carrot like smell. Naphthalene. Mothballs. And last but not least, OPC. OPC. You can get 2 smells here. One is garlic. Another one is kerosene. Right? Kerosene is very significant because we have got one important petroleum distillate added to this OPCs. That is nothing but your Aromax. Because of this, OPCs have got kerosene smell. Okay? Just remember this Aromax so that you will never forget about the kerosene smell of OPC. Fine? So now the answer will be your datura. Okay? Phenolic smell. Very simple. Identify the poison. So this particular question is about identifying the poison based on the color of hypostasis. Right? You can look at the color of hypostasis. This is cherry red, which suggests the poisoning could be carbon monoxide. Okay? Carbon monoxide. Poisoning and hypostasis, another important high yield topic. We need to learn about that. Let's learn. Carbon monoxide, just now I told you this is cherry red. Cyanide, okay, it has got brick red. So it's one of your previous JIPMER question. Sometimes Bright red would also be in the option. It can be brick red or bright red. Okay, that refers to cyanide. Again, phosphorus, aniline, potassium chlorate. Phosphorus, aniline, potassium chlorate. You can also include nitrates in this. Nitrates in this. When you get these compounds, remember it should be brown. Okay, it can be dark brown, it can be chocolate brown. Fine. And sometimes for aniline, you can get blue color in the option as well. Okay, so when you get any of these compounds, remember the color brown. Hydrogen sulfide, it is bluish green, very typical, very typical bluish green. The reason being it forms sulfur hemoglobin. Because of the production of the compound sulfur hemoglobin, you can get the color bluish green. Okay, this is again basic information. Let's see some more. If you get any mummified body, right, mummified body, you can get black color hypostasis, black. Okay, you can get hypothermia cases. Okay, or you can get refrigerated bodies in cold chamber. In both the situations, you get pink color hypostasis, pink. Okay, there is one more important condition, septic abortion. If the person dies due to septic abortion, preferentially, particularly due to Clostridium perfringens infection, remember friends, it has to be bronze, right? It has to be bronze. Remember that. Okay, when they give you the word septic abortion, friends, you need to remember bronze. Okay, so with this, you'll be able to solve most of the MCQs asked from hypostasis and poisoning. Moving on further, this particular antidote is not used in morphine poisoning, barbiturate poisoning, sulfuric acid, or is it phenol? What is the antidote which have been given? This is one of the physical antidote, activated charcoal. Very important to remember, activated charcoal. Okay, we'll learn something about activated charcoal, then we'll see the contraindications. What is basically activated charcoal? It is basically coal. Okay, charcoal. Why do we use? Say for example, since activated charcoal has got one important property, right? See, whenever it comes into contact with any poison, the poison will bind to the surface of activated charcoal. It makes a complex, right? The poison binds to the surface of activated charcoal, okay, and then it will get excreted. This property is called as, remember friends, make a note of this. This property is called as adsorption. Very important. This is called as adsorption. Let us assume that a person has consumed the poison. The poison is present inside the gastric cavity, right? You give activated charcoal. The dose would be around 1 gram per kg body weight, right? If it's an adult of 70 kilograms, you give 70 grams mixed with water. The poison is in the gastric cavity. You give activated charcoal. The poison binds with activated charcoal. The poison along with the charcoal will be excreted in the stools. So what do? You are preventing the absorption of poison into the system, into the circulation. What you basically do is you are doing decontamination. Okay, you are basically doing decontamination. So remember that by the property of adsorption. Now, any poison which is not getting adsorbed to the charcoal, I repeat, any poison which does not bind to the charcoal, we cannot use it. So let me tell you what are the poisons which cannot bind to it, and this is your mnemonic for that. Okay, chim. Remember that chim we cannot use charcoal. The letter C, it refers to corrosives, acids and alkalis. The letter H, it is hydrocarbon. Charcoal is not used. The letter I refers to insecticides, which include both OPC and carbamase. We cannot use. The letter M, it refers to metals, and the letter E, it refers to ethanol. So these are the places where activated charcoal is not of any use. Okay, it will not be useful. So remember that. See, when I spoke about gastric lavage with activated charcoal and subsequently I spoke about this adsorption, I would like you to know few things about gastric lavage as well. Okay, so let's learn something about gastric lavage and what are the contraindications, because that is again one of the repeatedly targeted areas in the exams set by NBE, right? You need to know that. You know, we can use various tubes. We can use Levacuator, we can use Ewald's tube, we can use Bowal's tube, we can as well use Ryle's tube, right? They can ask you which is the best tube. The best tube is your Levacuator double lumen. It's easy, right? What are the contraindications? Very, very important to know. What are the contraindications of doing this gastric lavage? What are the places where we are not supposed to do? So remember, I've given you in my lectures, I've given you one important mnemonic, C3V2. Okay. Remember, the first C is corrosives, right? Corrosives, especially your sulfuric acid, because see, when a person has consumed corrosive, and if you are introducing the tube into the gastric cavity, there are high chances of gastric perforation, right? So we are not supposed to do this, except few important acids. Phenol, because in phenol poisoning, the gastric mucosa will be thickened. We normally refer it as leathery mucosa. So that is why we can give gastric lavage in a person who's come with phenolic poisoning, right? Even in oxalic poisoning as well, we can give certain case of oxalic poisoning. We can as well give your gastric lavage. Apart from corrosives, comatose patient. In comatose patient, we don't give gastric lavage. The chance of aspiration is more. Convulsant poisoning. Remember, friends, I am not telling convulsion, right? I'm telling you convulsant poison. If any poison increases the risk of convulsions in a patient, you cannot give gastric lavage for that particular patient, right? Say for example, Nux vomica, Strychnos nux vomica, there are high chances that the patient can get convulsions, right? If in that patient, if you give gastric lavage, you are increasing the chance of convulsion. So we don't have to give this gastric lavage in that particular patient. Okay, moving on to the next V. The letter V, it refers to volatile poison. Volatile poison. For example, kerosene, because it can cause aspiration. Varices, bleeding chances more. Okay, if you see the absolute contraindication, very, very important. So remember, the corrosive you're not supposed to give. Okay, let's go back to the question. Now you can answer the question very, very easily. The answer for this is sulfuric acid ingestion, wherein the charcoal is not at all helpful, right? Now, yet another area, the preservatives. If you're going to preserve the organs, what are the preservatives you're supposed to use? The preservative choice in this particular poison, that is a catch, phenol. You have 4 options given: rectified spirit, sodium chloride, formalin, and sodium fluoride. Okay, very, very, very important. Let's learn about that. See, if you're thinking about preserving the tissues for chemical analysis, I repeat, if you are thinking about preserving the organs for chemical analysis, I can as well say toxicological analysis, we have 2 options primarily. One is sodium chloride solution. Okay, saturated solution of sodium chloride. The next important alternate we have got is rectified spirit. Okay, sodium chloride rectified spirit. Which is cheaper, friends? Sodium chloride is cheaper, that is why this is most commonly used. But if you ask me, sir, which is most ideal or which is the best preservative, I can tell you, friends, it is rectified spirit. Okay, so depending on the question, your answer should be focused. See, if it is common salt, which is better, the best or ideal, it is rectified spirit. But again, you have few contraindications for this. What are the contraindications? Right? What are the contraindications? Where all you are supposed to avoid these preservative? I can give you easier way to remember NaCl. Okay, The letter A, it refers to aconite. Do not use sodium chloride for aconite poisoning, and do not use sodium chloride for corrosive poisoning, acid alkali. Again, there is a catch. You can say corrosive except phenol. I repeat, corrosive except phenol, right? It might look a little complex, but it's very easy. For all corrosives, do not use salt, but only for phenol, you can use salt. This is as simple as that. Okay. If the corrosive is phenol poisoning, you can use salt as a preservative. For every other corrosive poisoning, do not use salt. As simple as that. Now coming to the rectified spirit. You know, rectified spirit is basically in alcohol, right? So you can't use this in alcohol poisoning because it might give you false positive. Even in formalin poisoning, you can't use. In phosphorus poisoning, you can't use. Okay, acetone, you can't use. Okay, so remember this. You can easily remember this list based on the rectified spirit. Rectified spirit is basically an alcohol. So if you use this for alcohol or formalin poisoning patients, it might give you false positive. Okay, very, very important. And remember friends, when I use the word formalin, this is again one important point I need to stress upon. Okay, formalin as a preservative. Can we use formalin as a preservative? Yes or no? Okay, that depends on what kind of preservation you're expecting. If you are going for chemical analysis, that is your toxicological analysis, right? The answer is big no. Okay, formalin should never be used for chemical analysis. Time and again, many times it has been repeatedly asked. Okay, even it was asked in 2 years back in NEET exam. Okay, which of the following preservative is not used for chemical analysis? Formalin should never be used because your extraction of poison from tissues will be very, very difficult. Formalin can be used in only one circumstance, that is your HPE, histopathological examination. If you are looking for pathological examination, you have to use formalin. Right. Now let's see some other samples. Vitreous humor. If you are looking for preserving vitreous, which is the ideal preservative, we can use sodium fluoride. Very, very important. Particularly when you're talking about alcohol estimation from vitreous humor, this sodium fluoride will be very, very helpful. Coming to blood, what is a preservative we can use? The ideal preservative would be your sodium fluoride. Plus you can also use potassium oxalate. Right? You can use sodium fluoride and potassium oxalate. Urine, right? One of your latest MCQ, urine preservation, you can use thymol. Okay, very, very important point. You can use thymol, or sometimes you can use phenyl mercuric nitrate. Phenyl mercuric nitrate can also be used, but remember the important option, thymol. If thymol is option for urine preservation, just go and grab it. Okay, fine. So this is about the preservation which you need to remember. I can tell you another important extra point. In what are the situations where preservative is not needed? If you are preserving any particular organ, and what situation where preservative is not at all needed? Preservative not needed. If you are going to analyze the sample within 24 hours, immediately going to preserve, no need of preservative. Or if you are going to preserve bone, there is no need of preservative. If you are going to preserve hair sample, no need of any preservative. If you are going to preserve nail sample, no need of any preservative. Or if you are deep freezing the tissue, then no need of any preservative. Okay, so remember these options. They can ask you, they can target this area in the subsequent exams. So the answer for this question, phenol poisoning, the answer would be your sodium chloride. Sodium chloride. The reaction associated with this acid is, so the acid which has been given is nitric acid. 4 options are given: acro reaction, xanthoprotic reaction, Lee-Jones reaction, and Matriotic reaction. What is the correct answer? So it should be xanthoprotic reaction. Okay, what do you understand by the term xanthoprotic reaction? See, let's discuss that. This nitric acid, whenever it is in contact with any tissue, it forms what is called as picric acid, right? And you know very well, picric acid is yellowish in color, which imparts yellow color staining to the skin, right? If the nitric acid is in contact with the skin, you can see yellow color staining. You can as well see yellow color discoloration of mucosa of the stomach. You can see yellow color teeth. Everything would be yellow, right? So this is called as xanthoprotic reaction. Remember that this is xanthoprotic reaction. We just have to see the other tests which are associated with different poisons. Okay, we get many MCQs from that aspect as well. Let us start from the first one, arsenic. It was asked in last year as well. Arsenic, we have Marsh test, we have Reinsch test, we have Goodsey test, right? These are the old conventional tests. We now have neutron activation analysis and atomic absorption spectrometry. These are two latest tests by which we can test for the detection of different metals. Okay. Apart from that, we should also see the different tests for alcohol. It is Kozelka and Hein test. Kozelka and Hein test. Okay. We have Kevet test. These two tests are meant for qualitative analysis. You just need to see the presence of alcohol in tissues or not, right? If you want to quantify it, if you want to estimate the amount of alcohol, then we may have to depend on gas chromatography. Okay, so this is the best test to go for quantitative analysis, gas chromatography, right? After this, let me tell you other tests for cyanate. Cyanate, it is Lee-Jones test. Okay, Lee-Jones test. Morphine, Marquis test. Okay, morphine. Datura. Mydriatic test. Okay, mydriatic test. Carbon monoxide. Okay, carbon monoxide Hope-Seyles test. And we also have Kunkel's test. Right, these are the two tests for carbon monoxide. Right. And so see, these are the important tests we need to learn while you're talking about different poisons. You may get questions on this as well. So the answer for this is xanthoprotic reaction that is associated with nitric acid. The IPC section relevant to this condition. Okay, the photograph which is given is vitriolage. Okay, what do you mean by vitriolage? Vitriolage is throwing an acid on the face to disfigure a victim. Okay, that is called vitriolage. Basically, vitriolage is nothing, it is not only about throwing acid. We can just say vitriolage is the use of any corrosive to disfigure. It can be an acid or it can be alkali as well. The most commonly used acid is sulfuric acid. Okay. So when we talk about the legal sections associated with that, see here you need to remember three important sections. If somebody throws acid and cause disfiguration, okay, this is, see, disfigurement of the face, it amounts to grievous hurt. It is 320 IPC. Okay, 320. But if they ask you the punishment, okay, if they ask you the punishment for vitriolage, the punishment for vitriolage is given by the two new sections which were introduced in the year 2013 in Criminal Amendment Act. They are 326A and 326B. Okay, 326A and 326B. You need to be sure of this. It's very, very important. If somebody has thrown acid, okay, and caused disfiguration, caused grievous hurt, it is 326A. Okay, if there is any attempt for vitriolage, attempt to throw acid, okay, and cause disfiguration, for an attempt it is 326B. Remember, throwing acid and cause disfiguration itself is punishable with 326A, 10 years imprisonment. Okay, an attempt for that same, it is punishable with 326B, 7 years imprisonment. Okay, punishment is not that relevant, but remember the legal sections associated with that. One is 326A, another one is 326B, punishment. Okay, make a note of this, friends, very, very important. Okay, the active principle of this particular toxic plant. Okay, so we have come to the plant irritants. When we talk about plant irritants, there are few important points you need to learn, right? While you are learning about plant irritants, I'll just give you 5 golden rules, right? You need to follow these 5 golden rules, right? So that you can easily learn and retain the content. Okay, let us take any particular plant irritant. The first thing you need to do is you should be in a position to identify the plant. They can give you the image, you need to identify the plant, or instead of the plant they can give you the seed, you need to identify that, right? First you should be able to identify. Second thing is, having identified the plant, you need to be knowing about the active principle, right? You should know the active principle. Sometimes they can give you 2-step questions. They can give you the image, they can ask you what is active principle. There are 2 steps in it. First, you should be knowing what plant it is, and second thing, you should know the active principle for that particular plant. Okay, this is the second rule you need to learn. Third thing, there are chances that you can get questions on the common names, right? Few occasions we have got in Central Institute exams, right, 2 years back. So you need to know the common names of the particular plant irritant and any specific medico-legal importance for that particular plant. And the last one is treatment. Okay, when you're talking about plant irritant, most of the time the treatment is very simple. You just have to give supportive or symptomatic treatment. It's very, very simple, right? Just like nausea, vomiting in pharmacology, you can use this particular symptomatic or supportive treatment, okay, for most of the plant irritants. The only thing is, you need to know these 5 important points. Okay, I will just help you to learn this plant irritants sequentially. Okay, let's start. What is this plant? Identify the plant. Okay, so this is nothing but your Ricinus communis. Okay, Ricinus communis, commonly called as a castor plant. Right, this is your castor plant. Okay, R&D. And what is the active principle for this particular plant? What is the active principle? See, if you look at the active principle, I've told you this is Ricinus communis, so you can easily remember it as ricin. We have other active principles as well, ricin, ricinolic acid. But remember, the most important active principle is ricin. Okay, this is one of the most important, most potent toxin. Okay, ricin. Okay, fine. So we have identified. I'll show you the seed as well. So this is the castor seed. Remember, when this particular seed is just swallowed, right, when it is ingested intact, it is not poisonous. But when it is crushed and then swallowed, then it will become toxic. Okay, so crushed seeds are toxic. Okay, how do you identify this particular seed? You can see this castor seed will be oval. Okay, it will be oval, or it will be a pea shape. It will be very smooth surface, shiny. It is shiny. Okay, and you can also as well see some white or brownish markings on the seed. Okay, when you see something like this, it is castor seed. Okay, very, very important. As I told you earlier, okay, this crushed seeds are very, very toxic. This is castor. The reason why we need to know about these features is sometimes you can get confused castor seed with croton seeds. Okay, this point is very, very important. Shiny, right, and smooth. Very important. Okay, I'll just explain that in a while. So let's see the seed. This is your castor seed. You can see the markings, brownish or whitish markings on the seed. What is this? So this plant irritant is nothing but your Croton tigilium. Okay, this is also called as Jamalgota. Okay, Jamalgota. This is one of the commonly grown ornamental plant. What is active principle? The active principle is crotin. We have crotin, we have crotonocyte. Many active principles are there, but remember friends, crotin, very important. Okay, crotin is very important, toxalbumin. Fine, I'll show you the seed as well. This is the croton seed. As I told you earlier, this croton seed is very, very similar to your Ricinus castor seed. The difference is you can easily differentiate. This croton seed will be dry and dull. Okay, it will be same color, same shape. Okay, but if it is so shiny with markings on the surface, it should be castor seeds. No markings on the surface, but it is dry and dull, it is croton seed. That is an easy way to remember. This is also called as Jamal bean. Right, this seed is also called as Jamal bean. Right, the active principle is crotin. Right, this is one of the important. This will cause intense gastroenteritis. Okay, this will cause intense gastroenteritis, diarrhea. The next plant irritant, you can see the beautiful seed, scarlet red, tip being black. This is the tip with black color. Okay, scarlet red in color. It is again oval seed, round. Okay, what seed is? Identify the seed. Very good. So this is nothing but your Abrus precatorius. Abrus precatorius seeds. Okay, what are the common names? We have common names like Gunchi. The seeds are called as ratty seeds. It is also called as crab's eye. Okay, Jecuretti, Indian licorice. There are many names for this. Okay, many names for this. This point has been asked in your AIMS exam. This was asked in one of the AIMS exam. Okay, so remember this is Abrus precatorius. This seed is very, very important. As I told you, this is red color, black tip. It's very easy to identify. Sometimes this seed can also be in white in color, tip being black. So remember, in the exam they can alternate these two colors and they can try to confuse you. So just make a note of it. It can be red in color. It can as well be white in color. What is the active principle? The active principle is, we have many active principles as with other plants. The active principle of this particular Abrus precatorius is abrin. Okay, we have abrine, we have abralic acid. Right, many active principles are there, but remember the most potent, most important active principle is abrin. Okay, so this seed is highly toxic. With this seed we can make one important needle, that is called Sui needle. Right, they'll try to crush the seed, they'll add datura, they'll add morphine, all these things are added, they'll make it into paste. With that paste they'll make a needle, that is called Sui needle. The purpose of the Sui needle is, right, it is mainly meant for cattle poisoning. Right, it is meant for cattle poisoning. Right, it is injected into the cattle and it is used as cattle poison. It is used to kill the cattle. Right, since it's an irritant, it causes inflammation. Right, when you're injecting the seed into the cattle, it causes intense local inflammation and necrosis. Right, so that is why we can as well say this particular injection of the Sui needles, it resembles viper and snake bite. Okay, it resembles viper and snake bite. Make a note of this, friend. This is very, very important. They can ask you which poison resembles snake bites, which poison resembles viper and snake bite. That is nothing but none other than Abrus precatorius with Sui needle injection. Okay, since you can, it's very commonly used as cattle poisoning. With this injection of Sui needles, It is as well called as ideal animal poison or ideal cattle poison. Right? You can easily kill the cattle without any suspicion. Okay, so this is ideal cattle poison or ideal animal poison. This is Abrus precatorius. Moving on to the next plant, right? See, this is again important. This plant irritant is called as Semicarpus anacardium, right? This is called Semicarpus anacardium, commonly called as biloba seed, biloba plant, right? You can see the fruit, here, okay? And this fruit, you can see the seed as well. See, this is the, you can see the nut, okay? This is the seed. You can see it is heart shaped and with a protrusion at the tip, okay? Heart shaped with protrusion at the tip. This is again very important because this particular seed marking nut, right? When you crush the marking nut, you get a black color juice. And this black color juice will be having important active principles, two important active principles. One is semicarpol, right? One is semicarpol and the next one is bilevenol, right? If you know the scientific name and the common name of this particular plant, you can easily infer the active principles. Semicarpol, Semicarpus anacardium, bilevenol, biloba seed. Okay, so this is marking nut, okay, with this semicarpol and bilevenol. This black color juice is commonly used for artificial brews, right? For fabricating brews, artificial brews, this particular juice is being used. Okay, so you need to know the medico-legal importance. Fine. I'll tell you some other plants which are commonly used for this particular purpose, artificial brews. So one is, you remember PSM for artificial brews. You remember PSM. What is it? P is plumbago. S is semicarpus. And M is madar. Madar is nothing but your calotropis. Just remember, okay, PSM, that is plumbago, semicarpus, madar. These are the commonly used plants for artificial brews. Okay, so remember this seed. Very, very important. So this is nothing but your Semicarpus anacardium, bilevenol, semicarpol. Let's continue with the next plant. It's a very common plant. There is no need of any kind of introduction. You should not be having any confusion in this. So this is nothing but your chili. Okay. It is Capsicum annum. Okay, Capsicum annum. You must have a look at the chili seeds. I'll show you the chili seeds later. First, let me tell you the active principles associated with this Capsicum annum. What is active principle? The active principle is capsaicin, and capsaicin. So this is the active principles, right? Where do we use? What is the medico-legal importance? Why should we know about this? See, this chili powder is very commonly used for torture. This is very commonly used for torture purpose, right? They can use the chili powder, okay? Sometimes it is thrown onto the victim's face and they'll try to rob them, okay? This is mainly to facilitate robbery as well. Okay, for these two purposes, chili powder is very commonly used. Apart from that, when somebody eats chili powder too much, like the person can have gastroenteritis, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, everything will be there. There is one more condition which you need to know from examination point of view. That is called Unan's hand. You can ask me, what is this, sir? This is nothing but contact dermatitis. Remember, contact dermatitis on chronic exposure to chili powder. People who are working with chili powder for a long time, they can develop contact dermatitis. This is called Unan's hand. We need to know this because it was asked one of your AIIMS session. So that's why we need to know about this. Okay, if you look at the chili powder will be you can say yellowish in color, right? The reason why we need to identify chili powder is sometimes chili seeders, sometimes we get confused, right? We often this chili seed is often confused with datura seed. right? So that is why we need to correctly identify which is datura seed and which is chili seed. Okay, I'll try to differentiate that. The next plant, so this is your Calotropis. Okay, it can be Calotropis procera or it can be Calotropis gigantea. It can be any species. If it is Calotropis procera, it is called madar. Gigantea, it is ecto. Anything, right? This is one of the commonly used. See, Calotropis is used in variety of purposes, right? It's used as cattle poisoning. It is used as abortifacient. You can see the stem of Calotropis is used for criminal abortion, right? And the juice of Calotropis is commonly used for infanticide. Okay, for many purposes it's being used. Let me tell you the active principles for Calotropis. Calotropis, just remember the word Calotropis. When you remember the word Calotropis, you can as well remember the active principles as well. Okay, Calotropis. So you need to remember calotropin. Okay, calactin, calotoxin. Okay, calotoxin, charin, and gigantin. I'm giving you the whole list of active principles obtained from this Calotropis. Okay, for examination purpose, you need to remember calotropin, calotoxin, okay, and calactin. So these are the three important active principles, but it is important to identify the Calotropis. This is one of the very commonly available plant on the roadside. Okay, as I told you, is used in where it has got multiple forensic importance. Calotropis. You can just see the Calotropis. This is again the flower of Calotropis. Moving on to the next area, the snakes. A 24-year-old man was brought to the casualty with a history of snake bite. The attendants have brought a photograph of the snake, and this particular, you can see the photograph on the screen. This particular snake is it neurotoxic, is it myotoxic, vascular toxic, or is it completely non-venomous? Okay. A similar question was asked in one of the recent exam a week back. Okay. So you can see the picture. This picture, the snake can be identified as what snake it is. So this is nothing but your Russell's viper. Let us see something related to the identification of snakes. If you want to identify the snake, first of all, you need to identify. The first thing is to identify whether it is a venomous snake or non-venomous snake. That is the first thing you identify. How do you differentiate the venomous snake and non-venomous snake? It is very important because most of the snakes are non-venomous snake, as you know it very well. Okay, only few snakes are venomous, right? Among the few venomous snake, we just have to learn very few venomous snake, because that is from examination point of view and practice point of view with regard to Indian scenario, right? So let me tell you how to differentiate, how to identify a venomous snake. Fine. The first point, if you are looking at the venomous snake, you can see the compressed tail. The tail will be compressed. The first thing. Second thing is, if you are looking at the belly scales will be very large. Large belly scales. And just look at the head. If you are looking at the head scales, its scales will be usually smaller. Its scales will be usually smaller. I am using the word usually because we have exceptions, right? Two important exceptions we need to learn here. One is your cobra. Second one is crate. These are the two important exceptions we need to learn. Okay. Cobra, how to identify? Cobra will be having a large head scales, but in cobra, we will have third supralabial scale being the largest. Okay, I'll show you the third supralabial scale. Don't worry. The third supralabial scale will be the largest in case of cobra. If you take crate, the fourth infralabial scale will be the largest. Okay, so that is how you can differentiate the cobra and crate. Though the crate and the cobra have got large head scale, you can identify that based on the third supralabial and the fourth infralabial. When we say supralabial, it is on the upper lip. When we say infralabial, it is on the lower lip. I'll show you that, do not worry. And the fourth important point in identifying the venomous snake is, you need to see the presence of two fangs. Right? You need to see the presence of two important fangs that will help you to identify venomous or non-venomous, right? So these are the four important difference between venomous and non-venomous. If you have identified it as venomous, I repeat, if you have identified it as venomous, the next step is to identify which species it belongs to, right? Let's see that. So the first snake in venomous, you can see the triangular head, okay? First point, triangular head, and you can as well see the diamond-shaped markings, diamond-shaped markings on the back. Diamond-shaped markings on the dorsum of the snake. You can see the dorsum on the snake, right? You can see three rows, one on the top, two on the side. 3 rows of diamond-shaped markings on the snake. These two marks, these two features, enough to identify that it is a Russell's viper. This is nothing but Russell's viper. Okay, very, very important. So this is your Russell's viper. The next snake. So you can see the Russell's viper again. You can appreciate the presence of the typical diamond-shaped markings on the back, right? You can see the diamond-shaped markings on the back. Fine. I hope there should not be any kind of difficulty in identifying the Russell's viper. Okay, fine. Next, let's move on. What is a snake? Right. So it is cobra. Why it is cobra? Because we can see the presence of hood. Only cobra will form a hood. So this is a cobra. When we say it is cobra, then again there are two possibilities. What are the two possibilities? It can be a king cobra, or it can also be a common cobra. It can be a king cobra or it can be a common cobra. King cobra. It is otherwise called as, the scientific name of king cobra is Ophiophagus henna. Why it is called Ophiophagus? Phagus means eating. Ophio, snake. The king cobra, it eats a snake, that is why it is called Ophiophagus henna. Okay. The common cobra, it is Naja naja. This is common cobra. Okay. King cobra and common cobra. Now I'll tell you how to differentiate. If you are able to see the presence of spectacle mark on the back of head, right, on this side, on the back of head, it should be a common cobra. The king cobra does not have any kind of spectacle mark, right? Both will form a hood. You can see the hood. On the back side of the head, if you are able to find out the spectacle mark, it is common cobra. If not, that is king cobra. And you have other differences as well. The size, the length. See, king cobra, it can grow up to 4 meters, whereas the common cobra is very, very smaller, hardly 1 or 2 meters, nothing more than that, right? But the typical feature, the salient feature differentiate is the presence of spectacle mark. Remember that. So what you can see here is a king cobra, the king, Ophiophagus annus. You can see the king here. Okay. I told you it can grow up to 4 meters, the largest venomous snake in the world, and India is a country having the maximum number of king cobras, right? Let's move further. I've told you in identification slide, the third supralabial. What you are looking at is your cobra. When you are looking at the cobra, just focus on the supralabial scale, right? So this is your supralabial scale. Start from 1, 2, 3. You can see the third supralabial scale being the largest, and it touches the high shield. When it is the largest, it touches the high shield, it should be cobra. This is how we can differentiate a venomous, that is cobra, from a non-venomous snake. Okay, fine. Extremely dangerous snake, extremely dangerous snake. This is none other than krait. It can be a common krait or it can be banded krait. What you are looking at is a krait. Okay, this is Bungarus caeruleus. Bungarus caeruleus, right? That's why the toxin produced by krait is bungarotoxin. Okay, alpha, beta, fine. So this is Bungarus caeruleus. This is, I told you, this is extremely dangerous snake, right? Most venomous. The fatal dose is so less. The fatal dose is hardly 6 milligram, right? 6 milligram of dry venom is enough to kill an adult. Okay, very important. I told you this is krait. But how to identify this? This is jet black, this is steel black or jet black. You need to see one important feature that is on the dorsum of the snake. When you are looking at the dorsum of snake, you can see the hexagonal scales on the dorsum, right? I hope that you are able to appreciate the hexagonal scales on the dorsum, right? By which you can appreciate that you can identify the discrete. Apart from that, you should also see the infralabial scale. I told you in crate, the infralabial scale, the fourth will be largest. Okay, fourth will be largest. So that is crate. Okay, extremely dangerous snake, extremely venomous snake. The next snake, the last in the list for Indian scenario, this is saw-scaled viper. Right, this is saw-scaled viper. Echinus carinatus, saw-scaled viper. If you look at the saw-scaled viper, right, on the edges, on the side of the body, you can see the serrated scales. These scales are used for rustling sound. Okay, it makes some rustling sound. It will coil around itself. It makes some rustling sound. This is saw-scaled viper. This is again one of the important fatal snake. This is saw-scaled viper. Another important point is you need to look at the head, right, wherein you can see the mark on the saw-scaled viper, the head of the saw-scaled viper. This is Echinus carinatus, saw-scaled viper. Okay, I can show you another picture of saw-scaled viper. I told you this will coil around itself. It makes some rustling sound. Okay, so this is how you need to identify the different snake. First, you need to identify whether it is venomous or not. Once having identified it as venomous, then you need to pick out the specific species. We'll move on to the next question. Which snake does not have neurotoxic venom? Which snake does not have neurotoxic venom? 4 pictures are given. First, as a first step, the first step is to identify the snake. The first picture is your king. King is there. Okay, king cobra. Second one, you can see the spectacle mark. I told you just now, spectacle mark. The presence of spectacle mark indicates that it is common cobra. Naja naja, right? And the third one, it is nothing but Bungarus caeruleus. It is crate. And the last one, it is saw-scaled viper. Now the question is, which does not have neurotoxic venom? For that, we need to have some, I'll tell you some basics about the families of snake. And then I'll tell you about the different toxicity of the snake as well. Different species as well. When you're studying about a snake, this particular study is termed as ophiology. This is called ophiology, study of snakes. Circulation of snake venom in the body, that is called ophitoxemia. Okay, that is called ophitoxemia. Remember that, ophitoxemia. Right. There is one more term you need to know. The study of venom and its characters, it is called venomics. Just have a glance about these particular terms, ophiology, ophitoxemia and venomics. Fine. Let's see the different families which are of importance in Indian scenario. You can have a lot of families. You can have Elapidae, Viperidae, Hydropidae, Atractispidae, Colubridae, Crotalidae. You have a lot of families, tongue twisters. But I'll tell you 3 important families. The first one is your Elapidae. Right? Elapidae, Viperidae and Hydropidae. Right? Technically, Hydropidae is a subgroup of Elapidae. But remember, these are 3 important families. Basically, the snakes in Elapidae family will be neurotoxic. It will be neurotoxic. The snakes in Viperidae family, remember Viperidae, viper. So, all vipers. Viper. So, it will be having snakes with vasculotoxic venom. In other words, they have got chemotoxic venom. Hydropidae, they have got myotoxic venom. Remember, neurotoxic, vasculotoxic, myotoxic. Fine. What are the snakes in this particular families which we need to know? We can have king cobra. The king is there in Elapidae. King cobra, common cobra. We also have crate. Right? King cobra, common cobra, crate in Elapidae family. Viperidae, I told you, vipers. So we have Russell's viper. we have saw scale viper, we have pit viper as well. Okay, and Hydropidae, myotoxic snake, the classical example is your sea snake. Sea snake. Okay, king cobra, common cobra crate, SS viper, saw scale viper, and sea snake. So with this particular chart, you will be able to understand the toxicity of a specific snake, right? Say for example, if they ask you what about the king cobra, you can as well say this is neurotoxic, right? All elapid snakes predominantly neurotoxic. Okay, king cobra, common cobra crate. All Viperidae predominantly they are vascular toxic, hemotoxic, Russell's viper, saw scale viper, pit viper. Sea snakes predominantly myotoxic. So remember that when they say myotoxic, they can as well give another question. They can ask you in which snake bite you get renal failure is very common. Then you need to choose sea snake as option because it is sea snake produces myotoxicity, rhabdomyolysis, rhabdoglobinemia, rhabdoglobinuria, and renal failure. Right? So you need to correlate each and every point. For that you need to have this basic knowledge. Okay, Elapidae neurotoxic, Viperidae vascular toxic, and Hydropidae myotoxic. Fine. So the answer for this is saw scale viper, that is hemotoxic, predominantly hemotoxic. So that is the answer for this particular question. Okay, moving on to the next irritant. We are now starting with metallic irritant. Okay, identify the condition, which poisoning it is. Which poisoning it is. Remember, this is your chronic arsenic poisoning. Okay. You can see raindrop pigmentation. Okay, chronic arsenic poisoning is very common. Okay, raindrop pigmentation. Apart from raindrop pigmentation, you can as well see hyperkeratosis in the palms and soles. Hyperkeratosis in the palms and soles. You can, in the nail, you can find one more important finding, that is nothing but your Ullrich-Mees line. I'll be showing that in a while. Nail line, Ullrich-Mees line. Okay. So this is your Ullrich-Mees line. Okay. Seen with chronic arsenic poisoning. And remember, this is not seen only with chronic arsenic poisoning. This is not specific. This is seen even with thallium poisoning and other conditions as well. Okay. But remember, this Ullrich-Mees line is seen with arsenic poisoning, chronic arsenic poisoning. This is a blood picture wherein you can see RBCs with some basophilic stippling, right? So this is basophilic stippling of RBCs. Basophilic stippling of RBCs. In which poisoning you can see this finding, basophilic stippling of RBCs? See, this is seen with chronic lead poisoning. Chronic lead poisoning is otherwise called as plumbism, right? Another synonym is saturnism, right? Plumbism or saturnism. Chronic lead poisoning is otherwise called as plumbism or saturnism. You can see the basophilic stippling. They can ask you what is the reason for this basophilic stippling, which enzyme inhibition causes this basophilic stippling. The enzyme is 5-pyrimidine. 5-pyrimidine nucleotidase, right? So whenever we talk about chronic lead poisoning, we always think about AL dehydratase, ferrochelatase, and coprooxidase. Remember, inhibition of ferrochelatase, AL dehydratase, coproporphyrin oxidase, it results in anemia. Okay, microcytic hypoglycemic anemia. But for this basophilic stippling to happen, remember, inhibition of this 5-pyrimidine nucleotidase is important. Okay, so in the question, they can just notice whether they are asking the reason of basophilic stippling or anemia. You can see a bluish deposition, that is nothing but your Burtonian line, right? That is Burtonian line, bluish deposition in the gums. Okay, this is again seen with chronic lead poisoning. See, bluish deposition of lead, it is not specific for plumbism alone. Bluish deposition in the gums, it is seen with other poisoning as well. It is seen with mercury, it is seen with copper, it is seen with silver, it is seen with iron. Many conditions they are seen with, but still Bertonian line is a term we specifically use for plumbism. Right? We specifically use for plumbism. You can ask me, sir, what is the basic, what is a deposit basically? What is the nature of these deposits? These deposits are nothing but lead sulfide, right? They are basically lead sulfide. They are seen with usually upper jaw. They are usually seen with upper jaw. They are located very close to the caries teeth, decay teeth, because in decay teeth you have food accumulation, there will be bacterial proliferation, production of H2S along with lead, it causes, okay, Bertonian line, that is lead sulfide will get deposited. Okay, so this is seen with the upper jaw commonly. I'll tell you the other features of plumbism. You can just remember the mnemonic I've told you in the lectures: A, B, C, D, E, F. A for anemia, B for basophilic stippling, Bertonian line, bone line. Bone line is nothing but the lead line. Okay, radio dense opacity in the metaphysis of long bone. In the long bones metaphysis, you can see the radio dense opacity, radio opaque deposits. Okay, you can see the colics, you can see the constipation. Remember, arsenic causes diarrhea. Okay, arsenic causes diarrhea. On the converse, lead poisoning, it causes constipation. Drop. The person develops wrist drop and foot drop, that is due to the involvement of motor nerves. Because of the motor nerve involvement, the person develops wrist drop or foot drop paralysis. Okay, the person can develop lead encephalopathy. Okay, he can as well develop facial pallor. There is one more very important manifestation which you need to know, that is, you can remember it for G. What is it? G? G is nothing but your gout. Okay, G refers to gout. The person develops gout in this condition, and that gout is referred to as saturnine gout. Okay, that condition is referred to as saturnine gout. Again, this was asked in one of your AIIMS exam. Remember that. Okay. What is this condition? You can see the pink color palm. Okay. This is called pink disease. It is also called as acrodynia. Acrodynia. Right? What is the causative agent? The causative agent is mercury, chronic mercurial poisoning. The specific nature of mercury is mercurous chloride. Right? See, if you look at this acrodynia condition as such, acrodynia condition, the person can develop pain in the peripheries, okay, hands and feet. The person can develop peeling of skin, okay, the person can develop swelling of the peripheries. All these features will be seen with acrodynia. Okay, it was asked, this is one of the repeat questions, many times it has been asked. So remember, acrodynia is seen with poisoning due to mercury. And guess the compound. Okay, what is this disease? Right, you can see the fish, you can see the person developing paralysis. Okay, so this is nothing but Minamata disease. This is Minamata. What is this Minamata disease? Minamata disease is due to the consumption of fish. This is basically due to the consumption of fish which is contaminated with mercury. Okay, this is one very peculiar disease, because most of the other manifestations which we read in mercury poisoning are due to inorganic mercury. But this Minamata disease is basically due to organic mercury. Okay, methyl mercury. Very, very important point. Okay, this is Minamata disease. It is basically due to the consumption of it. It is not a direct exposure, it is indirect exposure. Minamata. Okay. Identify the poison. You are seeing a capsule. You can see the pink color flower. What is this plant basically? This plant is your Papaver somniferum. I have given you the scientific name, Papaver somniferum. When we say Papaver somniferum, remember, it's nothing but your opium plants or poppy plants. Right? You can see the unripe capsule. Unripe capsule of the poppy plants. You need to put vertical slits on it. When you put vertical slits, it will exude milky juice. After some time, it will become dried. You can get a brown residue, right? And this residue is very, very important. Why? Because this is nothing but the crude opium from which we derive all the opioid alkaloids. Okay, all alkaloids of this opium group we derive from this crude opium. Okay, that is your crude opium. You can see the unripe capsule. One of the most important opium derivative is your morphine, right? We'll discuss about morphine. I told you the capsule of opium, poppy capsule. This is the poppy capsule, unripe capsule. When you slit, you will get the milk color juice from which you derive the crude opium. But when you cut it, you will get the seeds insides, and these are the seeds, right? These are poppy seeds, and remember, poppy seeds are not toxic, right? Because we use it, right? We use it very commonly for cooking. This is poppy seed which is not toxic, okay? Poppy juice, toxic. I told you about morphine, right? Let us see the actions of morphine. What important points about morphine with the mnemonic morphine itself, okay? Morphine, the letter M, it refers to meiosis. It induces meiosis, okay? Marquis test is used to find out morphine. It causes hypotension. It causes intense respiratory depression, okay? And it's one of the important substance which causes dependence, physical dependence. It causes withdrawal symptoms. It induces histamine release. It increases the intracranial tension. You cannot give it in a head injury patient. And one of the important antidote for this morphine is naloxone sodium. Okay, it causes euphoria and it induces emesis as well. Okay, just remember that. Most importantly, remember the antidote naloxone. Okay, naloxone is used for morphine poisoning. And remember, there is one more important point, that is meiosis. It induces meiosis. It induces meiosis. Okay, fine. We'll move further. You can see a method of substance abuse. First, you need to identify what method is this and which substance is commonly associated with this. This method is called chasing the dragon. Right? This is called chasing the dragon. You put the substance on aluminum foil paper, then you heat it and you inhale the smoke. You follow the smoke. Right? This is called chasing the dragon. Which substance is commonly associated with this type of abuse? That is nothing but your heroin. Right? It is nothing but your heroin. And they can ask you, heroin is natural derivative or synthetic derivative. Right? They can ask you that. I'll tell you the important street names of heroin. We need to know the street names. It is called as smack. It is referred as smack, dope, junk, brown sugar. Right? All these are the street names of heroin. I'll tell you the different methods of abuse as well. In case of heroin, I'll tell you the different methods of abuse. They can inject into the IV, right? Initially into the peripheral vein, then directly they'll move on to the main veins. It's called main lining. Okay. They can inject into the skin. That is called skin popping. Right? They can just sniff also. That is called snorting. Right? All these methods are very, very common with heroin. Okay? And heroin is chemically, it is diacetyl morphine. It is diacetyl morphine. It is highly potent when you compare with morphine. It's highly, highly potent. What do you see? This is again one of the most important daily in which you are looking at, the CNS stimulant. Okay? Naturally derived. You're looking at the plant, and that particular derivative is derived from the leaves of this particular plant. I'll tell you the name of this plant. It is Erythroxylum coca plants. Coca plants. Okay. From the leaves of this plant, we get cocaine. It's an alkaloid, right? We get this cocaine from the leaves of this plant. You know what are the street names of cocaine again? We can say it is otherwise referred as crack. It is coke, white lady, because it's a white color powder, snow, various names of that, right? Crack is the smokable form of cocaine. What is the basic mechanism of action of cocaine? It is basically sympathomimetic, right? It increases sympathetic activity of the body, right? It increases the heart rate. It increases the blood pressure. It causes CNS excitation. The person gets excited. It increases the temperature. That is one of your previous repeat question. The person gets pupillary dilatation, right? You see mydriasis, not meiosis. You see pupillary dilatation. You can as well see the person sweating. Everything is seen with cocaine because it is basically sympathomimetic. Okay, sympathomimetic. Fine. And how do they abuse cocaine? They abuse cocaine by snorting. Right? Snorting is very, very common with cocaine. Very common. Fine. And sometimes they mix cocaine with heroin. When they mix cocaine and heroin and abuse it, this combination is referred to as speedball. Right? This combination is referred to as speedball. Okay. And this is another important manifestation which you can see in a person who's chronic cocaine addict. Okay. So this is referred to as cocaine bugs. It's otherwise called as Mignon symptom. The person will have tactile hallucination. A person who's a chronic cocaine addict will be developing tactile hallucination. He'll be feeling multiple insects crawling on the skin. Creeping sensation on the skin will be felt by these people. Right? So this is cocaine bugs. They used to keep on scratching. Fomification is seen. You can see skin excoriation ulcers on this particular person. Okay? This is nothing but your cocaine bugs. Right? Apart from this, in a chronic cocaine addict, you can see when he's chronically snorting, you can see the nasal septum getting ulcerated. You can see the palate getting ulcerated. You can even go to perforation. Okay. You can see the peripheral gangrene. The peripheries of the body will be having gangrene, peripheral gangrene, fingers, tip of the nose, tip of the earlobe, toes. You can see peripheral gangrene. Apart from that, one more important feature is you can see the black color staining of the teeth and tongue. Okay, so this is very typical for a person who is chronically abusing cocaine. So remember that. Another deliriant needs no introduction. This is cannabis. Right, cannabis. Fine. What is active principle of this cannabis? What is active principle? All cannabinoids, alkaloids, cannabinoids. The most important cannabinol is THC. You can ask me, sir, what is THC? Tetrahydrocannabinol. This is the most important active principle of the cannabis plant. Right? Certain parts of the plant is having more concentration, certain parts of the plant having lesser concentration. Parts like flowers, leaves and all will be having more concentration, whereas parts like root and seeds and all will be having lesser concentration. Okay, so this is cannabis. You need to know the different preparations of cannabis. That we need to know. I'll show you the different preparations. What you're looking at is the bong. This is basically this. They can ask you the source of bong. The source of bong is derived from dried leaves of cannabis. Okay, dried leaves. Bong is very commonly used. It's commonly consumed. They can make a sweet out of it. That is called majun. Consuming, right? This is, what is this? This is ganja. What is the source? Can you tell me the source? The source of this ganja is dried flowering tops of female plants. Flowering top of female plant. Okay, so this is source of ganja. It can be smoke, right? We refer it as joint or reefer, right? They can be smoked in the form of cigarette. You can see this is joint reefer. What is this? This is the most important preparation of your cannabis. This is nothing but your hashish charas. Right? You can see oil as well. They can ask you which is the most potent form of cannabis. The most potent form of cannabis is this. Okay? Fine. What is the source? It is basically the resin juice from the stem or root, any part of the plant. It's basically the resin from the cannabis plant. Okay, the most potent form of cannabis. Right. Okay. I would like to tell you the street names of cannabis. When talking about the street names, what are the street names Most of the names you might be heard of, right? Wheat, pot, grass, rope, Mary Jane, okay, joint, reefer, okay. So many names are there. So the street names of cannabis. Well, let's move further to the next important deliriant. Okay, you can see the fruit with spikes on it. You can as well see the dark seeds as well. Identify the plant and then tell me the active principle. This plant, let me tell you, this plant is Datura. This plant is Datura. Okay, what you are looking at is the fruit of Datura with the seeds. Let's discuss something about Datura. I told you earlier, Datura is one of the deliriant. Datura is deliriant. You can have Datura alba. You can have Datura alba, which will be having white color flowers. The flower of Datura is very typical, very beautiful. You can see the bell-shaped flowers like a trumpet. Okay, Datura alba, Datura niger, black or purple color flower. You can as well have Datura strumanium. This Datura strumanium is commonly called as thorn apple. Right? This is called as thorn apple. Okay. Right. This is cholinolytic or cholinomimetic? Cholinomimetic or cholinolytic? This is basically anticholinergic. Right? Datura is anticholinergic. You can ask me, sir, how? For that, you need to know the active principle. The active principle of this Datura is hyoscine, atropine. Atropine is in trace, hyoscine is the major component. So that is why it is basically anticholinergic. You can remember the 8 Ds: dry mouth, dry skin, dysarthria, dysphagia, dilatation of pupil, drunken gait, okay, delirium and death. You can as well have the all cholinergic effects of the Datura. They can ask you what is the treatment. When a person is coming with this Datura intoxication, poisoning, what is the treatment? We have physostigmine, right? We have physostigmine. That is the best antidote for Datura. Okay, I'll show you the parts of Datura, the images you need to know. So you see the flower, bell-shaped flower, white color, alba. You can see the thorn apple, you can see the multiple spikes on the fruit. Fine. And if you are looking at Datura seed, it is very important. I've earlier told you that Datura seed is commonly mistaken for chili seed, capsicum seed. Right. So you can, I'll show you, this is the Datura seed and this is the chili seed. Okay, this is chili and this is Datura. You need to know the difference between Datura seed and chili seed. I'll tell you the differences. Datura seed usually darker, okay, dark, and it will have larger seeds, kidney shape. This is again one of the recently asked question. But capsicum seeds are yellowish in color. They are not darker, right? Datura seeds are darker brown in color, but it is not so. If you look at the Datura seed, the seeds will be having multiple depressions on the surface. You can look at the multiple depressions on the surface that is typical for Datura seed, right? Whereas if you take the capsicum seed is very, very smooth. It is not having any kind of depression, okay? And Datura seed, there is no smell. We discussed it earlier, the first MCQ, right? There is no smell for Datura seed. Whereas if you look at this capsicum seed, it is a little pungent and a burning taste, right? So remember that. And the one more important point is, if you look at the cut section of embryo, when you cut the seed, the cut section of embryo, if it is capsicum, the cut section of embryo would be curved inwards. Very, very important point, curved inwards. Whereas if you look at the Datura seed, it is curved outwards, right? It is curved outwards. Fine. So this is another important point which you need to remember. So make sure that You know how to differentiate between the datura seed and the capsicum seed. We'll move further. We are moving on to the next important group, that is spinal poison. We have finished deliriums. We are moving on to the spinal poison. Looking at the plant, you can see the round fruit, shiny, smooth fruit. Okay, so this is nothing but your Strychnos nux vomica. Right, this is nothing but your Strychnos nux vomica. Fine. If you look at the seed, it's very, very typical. You can look at the seed. It will be typically like an RBC, compressed disc, very thick. You can see the edges. Sometimes you can see fine hairs will be there on the surface of the seed. Remember, the seed is highly, highly toxic. Even one seed is fatal. Right? One seed itself is fatal. It is commonly called as Cuchilla seeds. Cuchilla seed, dog's button. I need to tell you the important active principles from this particular nux vomica, right? It is strychnine, brucin, right? Strychnine, brucin and loganin, right? So we have three important active principles: strychnine, brucin and loganin. The most important one is strychnine. These active principles, they basically target the spinal cord, preferably the anterior column of the spinal cord, wherein they inhibit glycine. I repeat, they inhibit glycine. That is how the patient develops, when you remove the inhibitory control of the spinal cord, the patient develops convulsions, right? The patient develops convulsions. You can see three typical postures. One is opisthotonus. You can see emprosthotonus and pleurosthotonus. Ophisto, emprosto and pleurosto. Opisthotonus is backward hyperextension of the spine. The person will be a backward bending of the spine. Emprosthotonus is forward bending of the spine, whereas pleurosthotonus is lateral bending of the spine. Okay, these are three important postures you can see. They can ask you which is the most common. The most common is opisthotonus. Fine. Okay, the person will be having multiple muscular convulsions, and that is why nux vomica poisoning, it resembles tetanus, right? Tetanus. The next important area, indolent abuse. Identify the type of abuse, right? This is again one of the questions have been asked last week. Recent exam set by NBE. You can see the person with the back. You can easily identify this is bagging. Right? But we need to learn, that is not the point. We need to learn what are the different types of indolent abuse. What are the different types of indolent abuse? Let's learn. The first one is sniffing. The person, he takes a container, he takes an inhalant in a container and he smells the fumes directly. Okay, so this is called sniffing. And then you take a bag, right? You keep the inhalant, place the inhalant in a bag, plastic bag or any paper bag, and directly inhale the content from the bag. This is called bagging, right? Huffing. Huffing, what you do is, you take a cloth, right? Soak it in the inhalant and keep smelling the cloth, right? If you are using a piece of cloth, it is called huffing. Last question. And then ballooning. Instead of the bag, the person fills the balloon with any gas. The commonly used one is nitrous oxide, right? The person tends to breathe from the balloon. That is called ballooning. You differentiate bagging and ballooning, right? Gliding. It is, see, in gliding, in this method of abuse, people normally use the room freshener, air freshener. They spray into the room and they keep smelling from the room. Okay. So when they inhale air freshener spray from the room, it is called gliding. It's called gliding. Yes, friends, this is another question, another area where the questions are being targeted now. Even in the last exam set by NBE, this question was being asked. So this is about inhalant abuse. The image is given, you need to identify what kind of abuse it is. Okay. So you can see the person wearing a bag, the person inhaling from the bag. It's very easy to say it is bagging, but still we need to learn what are the different types of inhalant abuse. Let's learn. The first method is sniffing. Right? You take the inhalant in a container and directly breathe the fumes from the container, right? You take the container, inhalant in the container, inhale the fumes from the container. This is called sniffing, right? Open the container, inhale, right? And then bagging. What is bagging? You take the inhalant in the bag, plastic bag or any paper bag, and keep inhaling the content from the bag directly, right? You take the bag, put the inhalant in the bag, and keep inhaling the content from the bag. So this is called bagging, right? Huffing. What do you do in huffing? You take a cloth, right? Take a cloth, put the inhalant into the cloth, and keep smelling from the cloth. This is called huffing. Ballooning. You need to fill the balloon with any gas, any desired gas which you want to abuse, right? Which you want to take, right? And keep inhaling from the balloon directly. The most commonly used gas is nitrous oxide. This is called ballooning. Glading. What is glading? You take most often this glading, they use room freshener. What they do is they just spray into the room freshener, into the room, right? And they keep smelling the freshener from the room itself. This is called glading, right? And the next is dusting. They inhale the aerosol directly from the spray itself. Fine. This is very synonymous term with your sniffing. Okay. So this is called dusting. Just remember these terminologies. Fine. We can expect prospective questions from this area. Okay. Sniffing, bagging, huffing, ballooning, okay, glading and dusting. The next group of plants, you can see the blue color flower, very beautiful flower. This is nothing but your aconite. Aconite. Not seen throughout India. It is very commonly located in Himalayan region. It is also called as Mita Zahar. Okay. Blue rocket. You can look at the flowers, right? Blue color flowers. It's called blue rocket. Okay. And it is also called as wolf's bane. Every part of the plant is toxic. All parts of the plant is toxic. The root is most toxic. I can show you the root. This is the root of aconite, the most toxic, most potent part. And remember, very commonly this aconite root is being mistaken with horse radish. How to differentiate? If you look at the aconite root, you can see it is longitudinal and you can see the wrinkles, longitudinal wrinkles on the root, very dry. Okay, this is aconite root. If you ask me, sir, what is the active principle? The active principle is aconitin, pseudoaconitin, right? Pseudoaconitin, indoaconitin, various aconitins are there, but the most important one is aconitin, right? What is the most important characteristic feature of this aconite poison? You can just feel it if you have the root in your hand for some time. Okay, what is that? It is the paresthesia, very, very important, right? It is the paresthesia of the skin. Tingling and numbness can be felt, right? Tingling and numbness. You can see the paresthesia in the perioral region. You can see sometimes you can feel that in the face itself. Paresthesia is one of the typical feature because the aconite, it blocks the voltage sensitive sodium channels, right? It blocks the voltage sensitive sodium channel. That is the reason for this typical feature, tingling and numbness, right? The person, this is cardiotoxic plant, so the person gets a different type of heart blocks, right? The person, cardiac arrhythmia can be there, it can be bradyarrhythmia, it can be tachyarrhythmia. So you need to manage the patient depending on the type of arrhythmia, right? The person as well will exhibit typical, another important feature, that is hippus, right? You can see the pupils contraction, dilatation, alternate pupillary constriction, dilatation is called hippus. It is seen with aconite poisoning, right? So remember this is your Mita Zahar, blue rocket, wolf's bane. This is your aconite. Okay, we'll move further. Another cardiac poison. This is oleander. This can be easily identified because you see this very, very commonly. This is ornamentally grown for ornamental purpose. This is along the national highways. You can see this very, very commonly, right? So there are two important, these are oleander plants. Two types of oleanders we are concerned about. One is pink oleander, other one is yellow oleander. What you are looking at is your yellow oleander, right? This is called yellow oleander. This is Cerbera thewachia. Cerbera thewachia, yellow oleander, right? That is also called as Pila Khaner, right? Yellow oleander. What are the active principles? Active principles are, you can easily remember, it is thevitin, right? It is thevitoxin, right? It is having cerberin, right? It has got cerberin. It has also got another important active principle, that is perovskites, right? Many alkaloids are there. Fine. So these are the active principles which cause cardiotoxic features in the patient, right? Highly fatal. It can cause derangements in the potassium levels, right? The person can get hyperkalemia, fatal, right? This is another oleander. This is your pink oleander, Nerium odorum, right? You can see the pink color petals of the flowers, Nerium odorum, right? Khaner. You can ask me, sir, what are the active principles? Active principles are very simple: nerin, nerifolin, and carabin. These are the three important active principles of Nerium odorum. Again, it is the mechanism of action is very similar to that of Cerbera thewachia. Okay, yellow oleander, cardiotoxicity. The management will be customized to the presentation of the patient. Okay, the last but not least cardiotoxic plant. You can look at the beautiful flowers of this plant. This is nothing but your digitalis purpura, right? You can see the purple color flower. We can see the markings, spots in the flowers as well. You can ask me, sir, what are the active principles? The active principles are digital. I'll just write it. The active principles are digoxin, digitonin, digitalin, digitalis. So many alkaloids are there. Okay. And what is the basic treatment for this? What is the basic antidote for this poisoning? You have one specific antidote you might have known, that is FAB antibody fragment, that is Digibind, right? Apart from Digibind, you can treat the patient symptomatically depending on the presentation. Digibind is a common antidote for digitalis. Okay. So this condition is associated with, two compounds are given. You need to identify which compound is associated with this particular condition, right? First, identify the condition. This condition is phossy jaw, right? Phossy jaw is associated with chronic phosphorus poisoning. Now the point is, we have two forms of phosphorus. One is white phosphorus, another one is yellow phosphorus, right? Which is toxic and which is non-toxic. Red phosphorus is non-toxic, very, very important. Whereas white phosphorus or yellow phosphorus, white phosphorus otherwise called as yellow phosphorus, white phosphorus is toxic, red phosphorus is non-toxic. This is what you need to know, right? And this white phosphorus, I told you earlier, it has got garlic odor, it has got luminescent property, and this is the one which is associated with chronic phosphorus poisoning, that is phossy jaw. Okay, I'll tell you some other extra point. They can ask you the synonyms of this phossy jaw. You can get Lucifer's jaw, right? Glass jaw. So in the exam, if they give you any of these specific terms, don't get confused that this is basically a synonym of phossy jaw, which is commonly seen with people working with matchbox industries and got exposed to white phosphorus, right? So we have come to the end of the session. We have discussed the most important parts, data of toxicology, right? So to summarize this, we have seen so many plants, so many seeds. To summarize this, I've just kept this rapid fire, right? I've listed all the images of these plants. You just have to identify what it is. Let's go faster. What plant it is? So you can see this is Ricinus communis, and you can see the shiny seeds. This is castor seeds. This is not croton seed because you can see the shiny with typical marking on the seed. What is this plant? This is your Croton tigelium, right? And you can see the dry, dull seeds, Croton seed. This is Jamal bean. Okay, you can compare both castor seeds and Croton seeds. What is this? This is Abrus precatorius. I told you this is your ratty seeds, which is important for swing needles. Okay, scarlet red with black tip. And what is this? This is Semicarpus anacardium. Semicarpus anacardium with your Bilava seed. And this Bilava seed is commonly used for what? This is commonly used for artificial bruise. And what is this? This is your Calotropis, right? But our Calotropis plant. Capsicum annum. You can appreciate the capsicum chili seeds, which is commonly used for torture and robbery. This is your marking nuts. You can see the thorn apple, the fruit of Datura with the bell-shaped flower of Datura. This is Datura. You can compare the seeds of Datura and chili, right? Capsicum. This is capsicum, this is chili, and this is your Datura. What is this? This is spinal poison Nux vomica. Remember the seed, this is your Cuchilla seeds. Dog's button, quacker's button, right? You can see the root of aconite and the flower of aconite, right? The most important cardiotoxic poison, right? Sweet poison, Metabush, Metazehar. This is your yellow color bell-shaped flower. This is your oleander, but it is yellow oleander. I told you what is the scientific name of yellow oleander, that is Cerbera thawacea. Okay. And this is pink oleander. I told you the scientific name of pink oleander, that is Nerium odorum. And I've told you the active principles as well, neriforin, nerin, and gravel. Okay. This is your digitalis purpura. And what is this? This is cocaine, Erythroxylum coca. One of your repeat aims question, Erythroxylum coca, we derive from the leaves of this plant. And cannabis, right? This is your unripe capsule of poppy plants from which we get this opium. What is the active principle of this particular toxic plant? It is calotropin, calotoxin, abrin, ricin, ricinolic acid, semicarpa, bilevenol. The obvious answer, this is a very simple question, obvious answer is calotoxin, calotropin, as the given plant is Calotropis, right? The active principle of this particular poison, this is Abrus precatorius, the active principle is abrin, right? So let's wind up the session. Hope you find it useful. If you have any queries related to that, you can reach me in Facebook. If you are in Facebook, you can reach me in Prepladder Premium Club, or you can reach me in Forensic Medicine, Nothing Beyond for PGME. Right? These are the Facebook groups where you can reach me for queries. If you are in Telegram, you can join this group, Forensic Medicine, Nothing Beyond, for clarifying any of your queries. All the very best.